yeah, I had made a mess of my financial life and I was in need of some desperate help. So the next day, I made the trek downtown to the local public library to pick up some financial bestsellers. The four books I ended up borrowing, I think, were the best of the best. My picks were The Total Money Makeover, The Automatic Millionaire, The Millionaire Next Door, and The Richest Man in Babylon.
I'm gonna be in debt about 200,000 when I finish.
While I'll readily admit that most people my age might be apt to pass up Dave Ramsey's book on first glance for its detailed discussions on mortgages and saving for your kids' college funds, his hard-nosed, zero-sum advice about debt is quite applicable to young women our age. Sure, we may not yet have a kid or a mortgage to pay, but how many of us have credit card bills that are scary not only for their total balances, but for the fact that we cannot account for any of the crap that we bought that caused the balance to go up in the first place? The whole point of this book is very simple. If you want to get out of a hole, you absolutely must stop digging. In other words, if you want to get out of a debt, you have to stop going into debt. So spend the cash, yes, those green slips of paper are still accepted everywhere, only when you have it, put the credit cards away, and quit using your estimated postgraduate salary to justify buying things that you really don't need.
I'm not an avid spender, but I do tend to splurge every once in a while. So that's just one thing that I have to monitor and make sure I don't do in order to keep moving forward.
The Automatic Millionaire is a fantastic book that teaches you how to put your budget on autopilot. Setting up an autopilot system essentially requires you to figure out two relatively easy numbers: how much money comes in every month and how much needs to go out. Once you know these two figures, there's a wealth of online banking tools that can help you tell your money when and where to go. All it takes is a few clicks and you won't have to worry for the rest of the month. The point is, a machine is not easily tempted by a clearance at Victoria's Secret. We're all human, so I rely on 24/7 discipline when you don't have to.
I'm a cheap spender, so I save that way, but I really don't like write a lot of stuff down and try to budget.
The Millionaire Next Door is by far my favorite personal finance book ever. It single-handedly blows the lid off of our common misconceptions about who millionaires are and how they handle their money. According to TV, millionaires are incredibly indulgent people who blow their money to the wind at all of life's most luxurious pleasures. Whether it's fancy cars, fancy clothes, or fancy food, this is the picture that is painted of the average millionaire. According to this book and its statistics, however, that picture is simply a stereotype, as the real self-made millionaire population has a penchant for the sales rat and are known to drive reliable cars for 10 years or more. Since the average person won't have the pleasure of striking it rich through an inheritance, a lawsuit, the lottery, or a high-tech startup, most millionaires attain such a status through savings, frugality, budgeting, and detailed tracking of their dollars. They simply choose to leave all the shopping, extravagant weekends, and Range Rover sports to the non-millionaire population. It's one of the great ironies of life, I suppose.
I always spend my money as soon as I get it.
Don't we all? Yet this is precisely what the richest man in Babylon is trying to tell us not to do. Usually when we get our paycheck, we pay everyone first except ourselves. Uncle Sam is taking his before we even see it. Then off our dollars go to Verizon, Comcast, the gas company, our landlord, Forever 21, and anyone else fortunate enough to cross our path as our money does its disappearing act for the month. But rewind for just a second and think how much better off we'd be if we just took 10% of our hard-earned funds before anyone else even got the chance to see it. 10% is such a fantastic number because it's small enough that you'd hardly ever miss it, but large enough to make a big impact over time. Imagine how much money you'd have if you saved 10% of everything you made for 6 months. Imagine how much money you'd have if you would have saved 10% of everything you made since your first babysitting job at 14. Now that should make you want to kick yourself. After taking in all that new information, I just needed to take a walk around the block. I contemplated all the new lessons I had learned from the books that I had read. All my financial mistakes I was making before just seemed so silly. The things I valued back then didn't really mean anything to me now. I mean, seriously, how many of us would drool over this? But completely turn our noses up at this. Life is just so backwards. I was reminded of a conversation I had with one of the girls I had interviewed before.
I actually went to college with a guy. Now, mind you, when I was getting my little refund checks from college, me and my girlfriends were at clubs, we were at parties, you know, I was spending them on clothes. He decided to buy a piece of property.
Wow.
He bought a piece of property, used the money as down payment, and put 2 renters in there, and the money that they spent, the money that they paid him in rent, covered the mortgage on the property and gave him an extra $1,000 a month.
Wow.
So he was living completely large, you know, and that was just something so smart that I couldn't even think of. And of course, he wasn't African American. He actually happened to be like one of the only 5 white people at Hampton.
Clearly, I had learned a lot, but I still had a long way to go. Knowledge is only half the battle. Once you know better, you do better. I mean, that is what a Think and Grow Chick is all about, right? So I took each book, one by one, and I applied it directly to my life. Stay tuned for part 3 to see how I set up my budget, automated my finances, saved 10%, and overall tried to live like a millionaire. Stay tuned.